YouTube is full of young men clutching their oversized microphones held up to their lips and shouting at the camera. Guys, it's not how big it is, it's what you do with it. So for a change, I thought we'd have a more laid back and reflective look at what's really going on in this country. I've lived in this benighted land now for over 70 years, in the dark monochrome days of the 1960s. I thought and I hoped things could only get better. When I was 17 years old, I bought myself a Triumph Herald and I whizzed everywhere at 70 miles an hour at least. In the 1990s, the dreaded speed cameras hoved into view, and by 2025, the Welsh Government requires everybody to drive everywhere at 20 miles an hour. And if the chap in front is being a little bit cautious, we're all doing 15 miles an hour. In the 1960s, you could post a letter at least twice a day. There'd be 2 collections, 2 deliveries. In the cities, there were 3 and even 4 deliveries and collections. So in a working day, you were never more than 4 hours from getting hold of your mail. Now look at what we have. We have email, 99% of which comprises, at best, it's rubbish, and at worst, it's dangerous, criminal incitements to click on a button that will either wipe your computer or steal all the money from your bank accounts. Last year, we had birds nesting in the local transmitter, the local mobile phone transmitter, and they were a protected species, so they couldn't be moved. So for the best part of 6 months, we had intermittent phone connections. Messages came in whenever. If you sent an email via your phone, there was no certainty that it was going to arrive. At best, they arrived maybe 24 hours, 48 hours late from time to time. They just got lost. In the modern age, letters are delivered by Royal Mail roughly once a week. So I pose the question, how much in the modern world is progress and how much is simply different? Goring, Hitler's fat friend, had a love-hate relationship with Britain, more specifically with the English. He admired the way the English, the British, controlled most of the world with a relatively small army. He liked the way we had a gentry who were laid back and just handled everything as though it was no effort. Goring was actually German aristocracy, and he bought himself an estate and he modelled it on the way he thought British estates were run, right down to the fact that he bought his hunting outfits from Savile Row. However, you always hurt the one you love. And he and his friend with a moustache decided to bomb the out of Britain, particularly London. So what has Goring got to do with today's problems? Well, towards the end he was somewhat drug-rattled and incoherent, so I'll try and précis what he said and what he meant. And one of the things that he said always stuck in my mind. And he said this: one German, a fine fellow. 2 Germans, they want to form an army. 1 Englishman, a fine fellow. 2 Englishmen, they want to form a club. And he hit the nail right on the head. The English are obsessed with creating private clubs at every opportunity. in order to promote members' interests, but in order to exclude everybody else. This national trait has caused us a lot of problems, and I believe it still continues to cause us problems. The old class system was described as upper class, middle class, and working class. These titles, working class, as though only one of these groups was expected to do any work and the other two just had money, as an act of God. What they really meant was that the working class were the people who worked with their hands and they got dirty and they were despised as a result. And that is how the myth began in Britain, that doing anything industrial or mechanical or working with your hands makes you dirty and sweaty and is to be avoided. When I was about 14 years old, the maths teacher told the class that I was in a story. He said he'd just had a conversation with the boys in the upper six, and he asked them what he thought they wanted to do when they left university. And almost to a boy, they replied, "Yeah, I think I'll go into the bank." And he thought that was sad, and so did I, which is why I remember it after all these years. If you'd asked, let's say, a class of American boys in the 1970s what they wanted to do when they grew up, what their ambition was, they would not all have said, "Yeah, I want to be a chartered accountant." And that is where we parted ways with America. So therein lies the problem. In modern day Britain, we'd lost a war and we were flat broke. Few people had any significant money, and the parents of these boys, the British boys, decided that if their lads were unlikely ever to have much money of their own, it would be a nice idea to work in an industry where they could be close to other people's money. Thus, bankers became the new aristocracy. The other issue was that parents didn't want their children doing jobs where they might get dirt under their fingernails, and so was born the myth of invisible exports, banking and insurance. They were the buzzwords of the 1970s. The Germans by this point were making world-beating cars, the Americans were launching rockets to the moon, and we were shuffling invisible paper. And that is where we are today. Banking, insurance, politics, the media, and boys wanting to be girls. Hitler said we were a nation of shopkeepers. Well, we're not even that anymore because Amazon and Google have put an end to that. Millions and millions of the cleverest people since the 1970s have been leaving. The most energetic, the most inventive, the most ambitious have been leaving. Millions have left during that period. Let me give you just two examples from my own experience. The lad I sat next to at school for 12 years, he went to Manchester University to read chemistry. And that's my definition of a really important subject. Technical, scientific, valuable, important. What could be better? Well, he said to me just before he got his exam results, if I get an honours or a first, I'm staying in Britain. If I don't get either of those things, if I get an ordinary degree, an ordinary chemistry degree, if I get an ordinary degree, I'm going to America. Because there are no decent jobs here for guys with chemistry degrees, and I don't want to spend all my life working as a lab technician. He went to Auburn University in Alabama, met a nice American girl, 2 kids, got himself a master's degree. First of all, he went into rocketry, working for Morton Thiokol, making rocket boosters for NASA. And then he read the runes correctly and moved into lithium battery development, where he spent the rest of his life until he retired. A second guy whom I knew for a much shorter period, he got a degree in chemical engineering at Sheffield. Next thing I knew, he was working in France, not in Britain. 2 Christmases later, I got a postcard from Australia. He'd moved to Australia and he never came back. In my 20s, I lived in London and I met guys from all over Europe who were either in detachment there on London or were on holiday. Interestingly, the Germans always went back home and the Swiss always went back home. I met a guy who was working his way around the world for Swiss Airlines. The Germans and the Swiss, they travelled, they experienced, they went home, they got a job, they prospered, their country prospered from their experiences. The English guys went on holiday, went hiking, stayed and never came back. And it's not just the brain drain which started in the 1960s. I've spoken to builders who are now leaving. So why does everyone with ambition want to leave? What's wrong with this country? And is it the case that we're just left now with the idle and the stupid? And are we destined, like other bankrupt, decrepit empires, to have our population just wandering around aimlessly in the rubble? Is that where we're going to finish up? I've lived in this country now for 70 years, and I can certainly tell you what's wrong with it. I think I'm as qualified to speak as any politician or media presenter who gets all their knowledge from X or from a government handout and lives in Fulham. So if you're interested in having a discussion that looks at what's gone wrong with this country and what we might have to do to put things right, feel free to leave your comments below as we go forward on this journey. In this video, I've mentioned the 3 classes that have traditionally existed in Britain. I'm going to suggest that there's a 4th class, the shadow class, that has existed for a long time and is just now making itself known. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. I'm going to go on to discuss long-planned secret agendas and a fork in the road in our history that's rapidly approaching, and we really have to make up our mind as to what direction we're going to go in the future, or else we're going to find ourselves in a very dark place indeed. So please subscribe and look out for the next video. In the next couple of videos, I'm going to talk about how we as a nation took a wrong turn and the way in which that choice has taken us down a road that has damaged us as a country by leading to problems such as low productivity, declining opportunities for our people, mass immigration, and the conspiracy to remove our last remaining freedoms. Finally, a quick word from my sponsor, which is me. My daytime job is building websites for smaller independent enterprises that need their website to feature at the top of search listings but don't have the thousands of pounds necessary to pay for advertising. My site, strategicsupport.uk, that's UK, explains all. And there are a couple of easy to follow videos that explain the dark arts of metadata, HTML, SEO, and other complicated sounding initials. Most websites are made from templates. These templates have likely been used for hundreds of thousands of other websites on the internet all around the world. So-called designers simply cut and paste in a little new information into the template. This means, as far as Google and other search engines are concerned, they're useless. I build from raw HTML code so that your information is woven deeply throughout the site. Regular updates, pictures and videos mean any website I build for you will climb to the top of the search results and stay there. I also undertake virtual back office services for some of my clients. I provide everything they need to run their enterprises without the cost of a bricks and mortar office.